Okay. Mark Rees, speaking on the future of science and humanity, said this, referring to those questioning the impact technological advancements have on our world today. Not even the best scientists could have predicted the impact of nuclear power. And everyday consumer items such as the iPhone would have seemed like magic back in the 1950s. This brings to fruition a question. Is nuclear power's impact as positive in 2020 as it was only a couple decades ago? And furthermore, is nuclear power's still a viable source of energy worldwide? To determine the answer to this question, understanding the current situation is vital before attempting to formulate a solution.
To begin with, constructing a nuclear reactor is exceptionally expensive, frequently costing far more than estimates initially predict. For example, a plant in Georgia called Plant Fottle is still under construction and is expected to cost $25 to $27 billion, already more than double the initial estimate. This isn't the only instance where high cost has delayed construction. Another case in South Carolina has led M.V. Romana, a physicist at the University of British Columbia in Canada, to believe that a different course of action must be taken. Nuclear power's apparent economic inefficiencies compared to other sources of energy, such as fossil fuels, encourages reflection on whether or not nuclear power is a viable source of energy. Will now explain the environmental effects pertaining to this issue and how they are just as important.
Although the radiation and emissions from nuclear power are largely negligible compared to fossil fuels, nuclear waste is still considered to be a looming threat. Most experts agree that deep underground storage is an appropriate long-term solution, but many skeptics doubt the ethics of simply burying radioactive waste and hoping nothing bad happens in the next 100,000 years. Although emissions from nuclear power are largely negligible, it creates its own unique set of issues. Many people fear the radiation released from nuclear reactors, both during normal circumstances and during disasters. Contrary to public belief, nuclear power generation is much safer than other forms of power generation. According to the Yale School of Environmental Studies, a well-reputed school in the United States, examples of this include that coal plants actually produce more radiation than nuclear plants during power generation, and nuclear disasters kill fewer people on average than other industrial events, further complicating the relationship between nuclear and the environment.
A third reason for this issue to be resolved, according to Radon Karim, a professor at the University of Malaya in Malaysia, is that developing countries across the world are faced with both an increasing demand for energy to support their economy and the rising prices of fossil fuels, forcing them to consider nuclear energy as an option. Ni Alatoy, director of the Nuclear Power Institute at the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission, says it best. Many people ask the question, why nuclear? To me, it's about energy being an option. Do you as a country need energy? And the simple answer is yes. These countries, especially Kenya and other South African countries, are hesitant and want to ensure that nuclear energy is a more beneficial option before beginning to change their energy structure to support their economy that is expected to demand 30% more energy in the next decade.
Taking current circumstances into account, our first solution is to begin the phasing out of all fossil fuel and renewable-based energy and to replace it with the power of the atom, something which up until recently seemed to be a certainty. Although this has not been the case, as nuclear currently only provides 10% of the world's energy, who's to say that it shouldn't be moving forward? Nuclear power provides nearly emissionless energy, even once the processing and extraction of the fuel is taken into account. Compared to renewables, like solar and hydro, nuclear is extraordinarily reliable, up nearly 90% of the time compared to renewables' 50%. The solution will provide the world with safe, reliable, relatively low acreage, and nearly emissionless power. There are reasons, however, that this path has not been taken. First and foremost, the cost of constructing plants is astronomical, with those currently being built running billions of dollars over budget and years behind schedule. Social stigmas, headed up by groups such as Greenpeace, have much of the public concerned about radiation released from plants, both during normal circumstances and during disasters. And so, despite the negligibility of such issues, nuclear does not have the public backing necessary. Furthermore, in a pro-renewable market, with the cost of hydro and solar decreasing by the year, it is becoming harder and harder to justify the price of nuclear. Therefore, the era of atomic optimism has come to an end, and Katie will talk about different solutions in the next slide.
Stemming from well-known nuclear power disasters such as Fukushima Daiichi in Japan and Three Mile Island in the US, the current public perception of nuclear power is predominantly negative, as the stigma attached to it convinces people that nuclear disasters are both common and pose a threat to their way of life. Taking advantage of this fear, many high-profile politicians, such as US Senator Bernie Sanders, are calling on their countries to increase the rate at which nuclear power plants are being decommissioned and broaden support for alternative energy sources, such as hydroelectric and wind energy. However, though this plan garners plenty of public support, this may not be as logical or as feasible as standards indicates.
Decommissioning a nuclear power plant is not as easy as just flipping a light switch into the opposition. It is actually a process that takes several years and upwards of $600 million to do. This is because careful monitoring must be done on the reactor and its equipment until radiation is dropped to safe levels. In reality, continuing the current nuclear framework until such plants are inefficient appears to be a more rational option. This is because the generating cost of nuclear energy per megawatt hour, $33.50, is inexpensive compared to both coal and solar, $123 and $50 per megawatt hour respectively. Even further, renewable sources are largely unprepared for filling the void that nuclear energy supplied, and this void would largely be fulfilled by further usage of fossil fuels, the exact opposite of what those concerned with the environment want. In developing countries already struggling with the high prices of fossil fuels, Solution 2, removing nuclear energy from the current global energy structure, only exacerbates the current issue at hand, and just requires a third solution, which Charlie will begin to do in the following slide.
Taking all the aforementioned limitations into account, our group has come up with a solution that best resolves these concerns while still emphasizing nuclear power's inherent benefits. This solution takes full advantage of a new technology called small modular reactors, or SMRs. This technology will cut in half the $6 to $9 billion traditional nuclear reactors cost. These small modules, such as the one behind me, will allow companies to centralize and maximize production to then be transported and installed in a building at the plant site.
SMRs have been used on nuclear submarines, but have yet to be used in public communities. NuScale Power, one of the leading nuclear power companies in the United States, is trying to change this trend with the factory layout utilizing SMRs depicted in this photo behind me. Much safer, these reactor vessels would sit underwater, below the ground, in a hurricane and earthquake-proof vessel, preventing the spillage of radiation in the event of a nuclear disaster. Further emphasizing safety, these reactors can be shut down without operator or computer action, or even power, just by several built-in fail-safe mechanisms.
When explaining SMR's many safety features and economic capabilities, scientists and politicians can begin to alleviate the devastating stigma currently attached to nuclear power. By comforting the public and giving them closure on the environmental fears of nuclear power, scientists and politicians will play a vital role in ensuring this plan achieves its goals. Possibly the most beneficial part of this plan is the effect it will have on developing countries such as Ghana and Argentina. These countries have been searching for a reliable source of energy to support their growing economies and a way to finance an investment for it. SMRs, albeit slightly more expensive than renewable sources of energy, are far more consistent and, according to the World Nuclear Organization, will provide 10 times as many jobs as other similarly sized plants.
A major sticking point for those opposed is the fear that selling these SMRs to developing countries could result in some potentially dangerous groups getting nuclear weapon capabilities. As of right now, this fear is nothing but speculation by anti-nuclear parties such as the aforementioned Greenpeace. But prior to giving nuclear SMRs to developing countries, many tests and experiments must be done to see if nuclear materials can be refined into fully functioning nuclear weapons to fully mitigate fears of heightened nuclear warfare.
Furthermore, such a solution will not be able to be enacted instantaneously. So in the short term, current nuclear power plants will continue to be decommissioned at the current rates. This would require other forms of energy to pick up the slack until nuclear power generators are ready for operation, which according to NuScale Power and other leading nuclear power companies will be at least 6 years. Nuclear power has been a mainstay on the global energy stage since the 60s, but recently its effectiveness has been marred by expensive construction costs, fears over nuclear meltdowns and exposure to radiation, and whether or not it should be replaced by other forms of renewable energy. As nuclear power's efficiency is still unparalleled, our group has selected Solution 3, SMRs, as the best option because it both reduces capital investments and begins the process of destigmatizing nuclear energy with the help of politicians and scientists explaining SMR power plants' extremely thorough safety protocols. And finally, in developing countries, its consistent energy source that these nuclear power generators will ensure will maintain nuclear energy in the decades to come. And we will now open up for questions.
All right. Thank you, guys. Let's go ahead and go through these oral defense questions. We will start with Katie. Katie, having finished your project, what, if anything, do you consider to be a gap in your team's research that, if addressed, would make you feel more confident about your conclusion?
I will personally believe, especially in context with our final and solution, is that I would love to put a political lens on our final solution. I believe that knowing the dynamics between these countries, and especially between developing and first world countries, would really have enhanced our research and given us something different to look at.
All right. Thank you. Charlie, describe how the content of the team presentation was changed as a result of group discussion.
So initially, before we got together, I believe that we had all envisioned that we would all individually talk about each of our lenses and then go about a solution from there. But it actually turned out after group discussion and bouncing ideas off of each other that we would introduce the problem and then go through all possible solutions and get to one final productive solution.
Okay. Will, what was the strongest counter-argument to the solution or conclusion your team identified and why?
Probably the strongest counter-argument to our solution, that being SMRs, is that they don't exist and currently aren't in use in the way that we suggested people should use them. And generally, any solution that doesn't have a proof of concept, at least a strong one, the submarines are somewhat of a proof of concept, but not one on the scale which we're speaking about, generally weakens their solution.
Okay, thank you. And Daryl. In the future, what change would you make to your group norms and how would you expect that to improve the team presentation?
In the future, definitely more communication would be critical. We talked very well. We established, as Charlie stated earlier, we talked about how we'd actually lay out the entire PowerPoint. But actually emailing each other our papers, our working IRRs, was something that was not really done until after this was written. So making sure that everyone was included in that was something that did not really occur, and definitely next time that would definitely be a priority.
Awesome. All right, thanks.